Everything's good. Okay. All right. I'm ready to go. How you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I got my notes.
Oh. You want to see my notes for this episode?
Yes.
I have zero, man. I got.
Oh my gosh. Great. No, I mean that just
know.
means it's going to be a really good episode.
I think so. It'll be reactionary and opinionated and not just list by list.
Carefully
So
planned out.
Yeah, when you say things, I'll be like, nope, yep.
Well, I got. Don't worry. I have plenty of things for you to say all that about.
Yeah. So what are we talking about
today? Well, first of all, welcome to the episode. Welcome to this week's episode. We don't. Is this episode number 17? Because Georgia's
I don't know. Yeah. So are we gonna we recorded Georgia's and Jaime's in the same day? Depending on how we upload them, you might already watch Jaime's or listen to it, or you might see this one first.
Who knows?
We don't. Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Welcome to this week's episode. I'm Frank. This is The Drop with Frank and Brian. I'm Frank.
I'm Brian.
And this is The Drop.
This is The Drop, and we don't know when it's going to drop.
And we don't know when it's going to drop, The Drop, with all the drops.
To be completely honest with everyone, is we're just trying to bank episodes, maybe?
Yeah, because it's coming to a time. I'm going on vacation in a couple weeks. I was actually going to see if you wanted to do 2 next week and really get ahead of the game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I was going to say, we could line up that set of guests at some point in time.
Yeah, that was some really cool ideas. Yeah, we're working on some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I think what I'm
episodes.
We did the Georgia one remote, but I think I'm like, well, if we have 2 guests or more, it's worth me just driving out.
Yeah.
To you. It's only 4 hours.
That's my alarm that you got to edit out. That's going to be great. Okay, today's episode, we are going to be talking about truck values, and it kind of came about because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it came about because our friend Bako Dave bought a Mazda, and that kind of got us talking about, we won't disclose what he paid for it, which is one of the topics that I have written down, is why is it so taboo to disclose exactly how much things cost?
Well, here's the thing though. People post things I mean what you're saying, if someone posted on Marketplace and they don't put the thing, they just say message me for the price.
That too.
Is that what you're saying? Because most of the time, there are rules in a lot of the forums where you have to put the price. So
no, I understand the price of what it's selling for, but even acquiring it, I'm not going to disclose what Dave paid for that truck because I don't feel it's my place to disclose exactly how much he paid for it.
Yeah, and I think that's just it, because that becomes between the owner and the seller, because the owner may have given him a deal over maybe someone else. Maybe there was maybe sometimes there's 2 buyers and one of the buyers is your friend versus the other guy's not, so you're just going to give it to him for a better deal or something. Yeah,
that's true. And then that kind of before we get way into it, that kind of translates also to getting stuff built as well. A lot of people are very hesitant to say exactly what they paid for stuff, whether it be fabrication work or, paint work, because I think of that same scenario, because you don't know kind of what deals or what people have going on.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly fine, because there are situations where maybe someone more than, say, I would know the person, so I can't base what mine's going to cost off what yours costs. So yeah, I think I don't think anyone should get upset for someone not saying what they paid unless they're a good friend,
Yeah. It was just something I've just noticed, throughout the years of doing all this, that that's just one thing. But yeah, so that's kind of what got us talking about this topic. What he, Well,
I can tell you what there was a truck that he was. So we're talking about our buddy Dave Pratter in our club, who just bought, or he traded his F-150 to Danny from No Regrets for the 4-door Tacoma, and then he rebuilt the 4-door Tacoma real quick.
Oh, hold on 1 second.
All right.
That's going to be fun for you. I didn't have my mic on the camera on.
Oh, that's fine, because now you have it on, so it'll link back.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. As long as you have it on the same file. All right. So Dave essentially rebuilt that Tacoma, does what Dave does, gets something, completely redoes it, and then instantly sells it. Right. So,
well, Which was sort of like the joke, you know, but that's what he does. That's like, and I actually have that written down. I have like a whole little Bako Dave talking point right here.
Yeah, well, we'll get him on here one day to kind of explain his ways, but
yeah. Well, the only thing that I wanted to kind of like bring up about him was, like you were saying, that he buys and sells and rebuilds. And I remember one time us talking about, like, you know, it'd be really cool, and we'll talk to him about this when we get him on the show, but like how if he would just like take regular trucks and just like bag them and get them to a point to where he can sell them for a fairly decent price. I wouldn't say like a cheap price, but like a fairly decent price for like other people to finish. So people have like a really solid platform to begin with, and then go on to build something to their own taste.
Yeah, the one thing that Dave is he's a painter by trade. Mm-hmm. So he can save a ton of money by buying something that maybe needs paint, or he can do a repaint. So he can buy something that's essentially done and then make it look completely different for a very minimal amount of money, to where someone like us who doesn't know how to paint, that would cost $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 depending on what it was. So yeah, I've always told him, like, he's got a really good he can see things that when they're done. Mm-hmm. So he can go out and buy like a truck off Craigslist, even just lower it, put it on some cool wheels, and then, because he likes the design process of it.
Yeah, rather than having them. Yeah,
rather than owning it. And he even said, though, like, that whole process of his with the F-150 trade and all that was not to keep the Tacoma, because he didn't love the Tacoma. Mm-hmm. It was he knew he could sell it, and then that would complete the sale of his F-150 almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know? Yeah, and that's just part of the process of his deal going down, all that. Because again, like, that's the thing, is like everybody kind of has their own deal going on, you know. So it's hard to say exactly, you know, how the deal should go down, because everybody has their own thing going on.
Yeah, and that, like, if you think about it, so if you have a truck that's worth 50 or 60 grand, like his F-150 was, it's hard to get. So, like, not everyone has 50 or 60 grand to spend, mm-hmm. or can get a loan. So sometimes you have to, he broke it down. Basically, he's like, well, if I get half cash plus this truck, then I can take that truck, put this much money into it, and then flip it for this much money. Then I'll get my 50 or 60 grand that I wanted to, you know. So he's just kind of thinking like 2 or 3 steps ahead of the game.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And like kind of to go with it, like that Tacoma turned out pretty dope. Like, it turned out pretty cool.
Big time, yeah. And
like, I liked it before, but he definitely made it like really nice. Do you want to say who got it? Or
yeah, our another guy in our club, this Cheesy, Ryan Canberra.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which is cool because that truck kind of stays in the club. Another cool truck stays in the club.
Yeah, well, no regrets to Forbidden.
Yeah, kind of
Forbidden.
Like we were talking last week with Jaime, like how, you know, Forbidden and No Regrets is so like kind of like. Not connected. Is connected the right word? Like, just there's
intertwined.
It's always been a thing. Like, these two clubs have always been a thing, you know. So yeah, it was really cool.
That's for sure. But so it started even before this Mazda that he got. When we really started talking about values of trucks and the reason mm-hmm. some are more expensive than the other, because there's a Mitsubishi that Trey 5 Customs built way back in the day, a silver and red
that's
one.
Right, yeah.
So he sorry, I have to turn my thing off. That truck was raffled off by Trey 5.
Oh, I forgot about that. It was, yeah.
Yep.
I forgot about that.
Florida. It went to Florida, and then someone bought it from Florida, and so Dave loves. God dang it! Sorry,
it's okay. I was running into some little issues, kind of doing stuff.
I'm getting text messages through my computer.
Oh.
Okay, so. Anyways, so that truck is now in San Antonio, and the guy had it for sale for like $20,000. And it's a former SEMA truck. It was a frame off build, all this stuff. But even Jeremy, you know, will tell you, he goes, it was when he first started building trucks. So there's a lot of things that need to be redone. He said the steering wasn't right. The front suspension wasn't right. The rear hydraulics didn't really, weren't really built right. You know, he goes, so I told Dave all this, and Dave was like, well, it's still worth a lot of money because all the interior's done, all the stereo's done, the whole engine compartment's done, you know, and most of the paint, the body's already straight. Mm-hmm. So yeah, with where we're going with all this is like the prices of things are so high with mini trucks now, but sometimes you have to think about the long-term gain. And like 20 grand for that truck is crazy, but maybe like 12 or 13, but even at 12 or 13,000, it's just like, why? Remember when cover trucks were like, we called it the $10,000 thing because a cover truck was instantly 10 grand.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that's a cheap truck.
Yeah. So it's just like, when you're buying something, he broke it down to me because I was like, Dave, that's not a good deal. That's too much money. It's a Mitsubishi. It's not a desirable brand. It's not, and I always think of resale and all that stuff. And I'm thinking of resale because I know he's going to resell it eventually. But
that's interesting because like if he bought it for 20, and then what could you get for like what is the selling price for that? And I understand like a lot of this stuff is. And it kind of relates to like because I have other collectibles, as you know, like I collect comics and I collect like little things here and there. And, the idea is like, this is worth X amount of money. But then the retort is always, well, it's only worth what people are going to pay. So is that how we arrived here? Is like these prices aren't because they're arbitrary. There's no like it's not like back in the day when, as I've said before, like my family had a used car lot. So we would buy and sell a lot of cars. And there was actually a book called The Old Cars Price Guide. And it would break down each car by year, by model, exactly what it's worth. And then it would have a, good, fair, poor, rating. And it could give you a pretty good assessment on exactly what cars are worth. There's nothing like that for what we do. So all of this is like arbitrary and just people have decided that that's what these things are worth. So like my question is like, are these prices that we're paying right now only a byproduct of what people are willing to pay, and people are willing to pay a lot of money for these things?
I think so. And I think the other part of the equation is one, the value of the truck stock, right?
Okay.
So if you look at, say for that Mitsubishi truck, for example, like if you go on Craigslist or whatever, if you want a Mitsubishi truck, they're hard to find. They didn't make as many as the other trucks. They're hard to find in good condition. You're not going to find replaceable interior parts. There's not like a junkyard that's dedicated to Mitsubishi or D50 trucks. So it's rare, right? But it's also one that's it's not desirable, right? So it's rare, which takes the value up, but it's not desirable, so it brings the value right back down. To where a Toyota truck, for example, which is probably the most desirable mini truck, whether you like them or it's your favorite or it's not your favorite.
Which we talk about often on this podcast.
Yeah. So let's look at a Tacoma. Let's look at the late 90s Tacomas. They're a stock Tacoma with 200 and something thousand miles on it that's in good shape is $5,000 to $8,000.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's in okay shape. Like funny enough, I've seen trucks where it's all like a 98 Tacoma extra cab, 300,000 miles, body's pretty straight, 4,800. I'm all, that's a good deal.
Yeah. Right. But then you have to think about like, what do you want to do to the truck? Do you just want to lower it? Do you want to bag it? Like, what is your end goal? And I think when the prices of mini trucks were a lot cheaper is because the work was a lot cheaper. If you go to try to get a truck bagged in 4-link now, there is no because it's a mini truck, it's cheaper to work on. Right?
Because it's the same. It's the same as building a hot rod.
It doesn't matter what it is. The labor hours are the same. And there's not a million shops doing them anymore. Where back
that's a good point.
What was it?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s when there was 15 shops just in the Inland Empire and Orange County bagging trucks.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I didn't think of that. That there are very, very, very few shops that actually do work. And, we spoke about this before about like kind of the economy of the scene and what we do. And that economy has matured over the years because, in the early 2000s with 50 shops all, vying to try to bag people's rides, I guess the supply was high, the demand was low kind of thing. And now it's the other way around. And also shops have matured in the fact that like, they're not going to be doing a back half on your truck for $1,500 anymore. They're like, it's X amount of hours. We charge this much per hour. And then this is what it costs.
Yeah, exactly. And good luck sometimes even trying to find a shop that's going to work on a mini truck.
Yeah, I know. I struggle with that, myself, because I'm mechanically inclined, but I'm not a fabricator by any means, or I'm a real mechanic by any means. So when stuff happens, so not only does stuff happen to these vehicles, like I'm taking the 4Runner to a mechanic tomorrow to get a gas tank situation worked out. But the thing is not only am I taking it to this mechanic who is a mechanic and knows how to work on cars, but now I'm taking him this really exotic, I guess is the right word, like thing that he has to work on. It's not just like dropping a stock gas tank, it's like dropping a fuel cell. And now, so now not only do you have to find people who are mechanically inclined, but they're also mechanically inclined and knowledgeable about these, very intricate things.
Yeah. Yeah,
which all adds up, makes the price go up. That's the point that I'm trying to get to.
And I think the biggest thing that's making the prices are not going to ever come back down, and that has nothing to do with quote unquote inflation or whatever. It purely has to do with supply
and the demand.
I mean, because the demand is naturally going to, even if the demand stayed flat, the supply is going to keep going down. Right, so it's going to create this natural, supply and demand issue, because mini trucks don't last like some other trucks do. So if you had a Toyota pickup or a Mazda pickup, whatever it is, sitting in a field, depending on what part of the country, that truck's going to disappear. The sheet metal isn't as thick like it is on, like the Chevy or Ford trucks, where it'll last longer. Those trucks are gone. You see them around Southern California and Arizona and the Southwest. You still see Nissan hard bodies driving around and old Toyotas driving around. But if you go to certain other parts of the country, you could look at a 2008 Chevy truck and the bed's rotting off.
That's been a thing, forever, as far as West Coast cars, Southwest cars are always cleaner than anything back east. But also, that's a great point. But also the fact of the matter is like when people were buying old cars, like trucks, I guess this works for old trucks as well, but old cars, like people were buying old cars that were just used to a certain point and then discarded for like families and stuff. But with mini trucks specifically, a lot of them are used for work trucks. So not only are they used to the point of not using them anymore, they've been like really used to the point of not,
Yeah, and they were and they were usually bought second or third hand, so they're really beat up, because you don't buy a Nissan hardbody if you're not going to do what we do with them. You're not going to really there's no reason to like.
Exactly. Yeah, for a regular dude who's going to work and using it as a work truck, there's no reason to keep it nice. They're just using it for their purpose.
And the other thing, the West Coast, yes, there is like the things last longer as far as metal and stuff, but with all the emissions laws, someone that they bought a truck for $3,000 or $4,000 to work with, once it needs new catalytic converter or new whatever, the truck's it's done. It's gonna go into the junkyard. They're not gonna spend more than what it costs to keep it going. So there is that part of it too, and so these trucks are gonna go. They're just gonna become more valuable.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and it's just because it's the same, but it's a lot different, because it's the same in the fact that this is like, I'm pretty sure people were having conversations, not like in a podcast form like in this, but people were having conversations, in the 70s and 80s and 90s about buying old cars. Like they're like, why is this, 63 C10 worth so much money? You see what I'm saying? Maybe that's a bad example.
It's hard. It's hard to compare the two, because older cars, they're simple, they're cheap to keep running, depending on if you know what I mean. That they don't have the emissions, the pre-74 like in California, and then same with out here. Like you don't have to mess with any of that stuff. So keeping those makes more sense, rather, because you can still register it, you can still do this, but you can't do that with a 90s pickup truck.
No, that's a really, really great point. I didn't really consider that, the emissions thing. I wonder. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm kind of like process what you're saying, because that makes a ton of sense. that all these cars with emissions and stuff like that. Once that stuff starts going bad, that it presents a lot more problem, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because cars made in the 80s and cars made in the 90s are essentially, they were like throwaway cars.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
Unless it was a desirable model, like the Honda Civics are really desirable still.
But aren't those essentially just throwaway cars too? Because those are just commuter cars that people.
They were just commuter cars, but in the late 90s, they were collectible cars for kids.
Yeah, that's true.
You could say that they were 100% more popular than mini trucks.
Oh yeah, I would say. Yeah, definitely.
And so those kids that were 16, 17, 18 that had those, they're buying those up now too. So the values of a Honda Civic are, depending on what year, depending on what trim, are astronomical. Like when we moved into this house, we were trying to keep our budget low, so we went and bought a used 4-door 98 Honda Civic. And the 95s, I think 95s to 99 Honda Civics cost more money than the 2000s to 2005s.
Just because of the trim, or just
they were more popular. They looked better. They were more. They had more style. They were more customized. Like people wanted to customize those versus the later years.
Yeah.
And then you get into trims with the Hondas, like the VTEC trims and the EX trims and the SI trims. Like, yeah, just go search on Craigslist or search around. I was finding mint 4-door DX Honda Civics, which is like a lower trim. I remember specifically finding one in San Bernardino that was garage kept with 60 or 70,000 miles on it, and it was about $10,000.
Yeah. Have you seen that the thing on Instagram, the Japanese classics page, where they're importing?
Yeah.
Dude, those are so sick. Like I saw a 4Runner. It was like a 97, 98 4Runner, super clean, and it was a diesel. Right? They're all right-hand drive because they're all Japanese import cars. But then like even that, like the price for that was like $16,000 for that thing, and even that's not a bad price actually for an SUV. A clean SUV Toyota, $16,000. That's a pretty decent price.
It is, but I mean, $16,000. You can go and find like a newer Tacoma, like a newer model 4Runner for $16,000. Like a 2005, 2006.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Versus that old one. But so those are like more collectibles and stuff. There's a Toyota out here. I'll try to find photos of it. It's been a while, but it was on Craigslist. And it was a 80s Toyota. I think it was 4-wheel drive. But anyways, it was almost $50,000.
50?
Yeah, it had this crazy digital dash. It was in mint condition. And it was a factory turbo, factory AC, factory power windows. And I mean, look at Barrett Jackson. That it was 2 or 3 years ago that Mazda sold for 20, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we're getting to that crossroads where what's more valuable, a factory stock older compact truck or SUV versus a highly modified one?
That is a great conversation to have, because like it's always been historically that customized cars are worth less. But now, is that still the case? Because like, I mean, just to kind of like tie this whole conversation together, the price of building one is going up. So the price of the customization is going up, because like it used to be, the old trope has always been that like we're dumping so much money into these trucks that are worthless, but now it seems like it's starting to like level off to where it is actually not a bad investment to be putting money into something like this, or the right truck. Because like you said, building a Tacoma is better than building like an S10.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It also depends on the crowd too, or the type of person, because there still is there's a market for like a modified S10s, but there's really not a market for like stock S10s.
Oh yeah, so that kind of flies in its own face.
Yeah. Like,
is there even a market for modified S10s? I feel like no one really messes with S10s anymore.
like square body S10s.
Oh, square bodies. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Like those ones. And then there's rare trim S10s, like
rare trim S10.
Not rare trim, but desirable trim.
Okay.
So there's manual V6s. like those trucks scoot. Those trucks are a blast to drive because that's a 4.3 V6, which is essentially of the same as the LS or the V8, not the LS, but the V8 with the front 2 cylinders cut off. So you can still buy like front drive kits. You can buy superchargers for them. You can buy all this stuff. So yeah, it just depends on who you are. But I think overall, probably the Toyotas are definitely the more desirable. But here's another thing to think about too. And I learned this by working in at the different shops that are building the Chevys and stuff. Time. So if you go to a shop right now, say Tray 5, and you say, I want you to build me this C10. Here it is. It's a stock one. I want you to put it on a chassis, put a new motor in it and stuff. They can't even get to it for a year, maybe a year and a half. And I think that's what drives like Barrett Jackson prices up on those, because you get it right now. You don't have to wait. You just like, oh, I want that's what I want essentially. So I'm just going to buy it right now. So you're paying for the time as well. That you're going to save.
So that's like the next bracket of talking points that I have here is buying finished trucks versus building trucks. And this kind of goes back to the topic of the built not bought thing. But I think the previous topic of the built not bought was sort of like the nuances of it, like what am I trying to say? Like the fundamental, like which one is better kind of thing, or like, you know, are you more of a builder if you build it? Like that was a whole separate conversation. I think how it applies to this conversation is exactly what you said. Does it make more financial sense to purchase a truck that's already finished or build one yourself? And you hit it off the bat with that time, like that is a huge factor in it, is the time to have it built. Because honestly, we have to be very honest with ourselves. There's sometimes things go into a shop and they spend years and years and years in that shop. You know,
sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they don't come out.
Sometimes they don't. They don't even get finished. They get shoved away.
So if you're gonna find a reputable shop that's like we'll say Fat Fabs, right? So you because Dave got back to Baco. Dave, he was gonna buy a factory turbo Toyota. And he called up the guys at Fat Fabs and said, hey, how much to build a chassis for this? And it was double the price of what the truck was going to be. So, but you knew it was going to get done, right? So you knew it was going to go in there. It was going to get done. And it was, so but you can go and find a truck that may not necessarily be done, but it's already to the point where you were going to pay this shop X amount of dollars to do that. So you've saved 6 months to a year's worth of time, and you've saved money because you're not going to get that money back out of it.
So do you think, what is your opinion on worth versus worth? So if you went to a shop, okay, so my truck, for example, and I was going to bring this up because I'm going to bring up something that we talked about a few years ago, and then I'm going to revisit that question in today's current time. Yeah. Because, I have X amount of dollars in my truck, which the taboo thing I'm not going to disclose exactly. I was going to. I have it all written down, but maybe I'm not going to do that. So I have X amount of dollars into my truck. And one time I asked you, just out of curiosity, I said, what do you think I could sell the 4Runner for? And you said, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said at the time it was probably worth about 12. And I was like, oh, yeah, really? I said, well, what do you think Joey's 4Runner? Joey, NorCal Joey from our club, who has the green 4Runner, which is body dropped. You said that's probably worth 15. And I was like, well, so the body drop, like that's the difference is the body drop. So now talking with that, now how do you feel about that now?
Same thing.
You think that those are worth the exact same prices or
no, not price wise, but
well, okay. I guess I should have clarified. That's like a 2-part question. One, do you feel the difference is the same? And one, do you feel those prices are still the same?
I feel the price gap is still the same because most people who are not Frank want their want their trucks body dropped. If you're going to spend a lot of money to get your suspension done, there is zero reason to see your frame under that suspension.
And right? I will have my retort. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'll edit it out because it doesn't matter anyways.
Okay.
So basically, if you're going to spend all that money, the price difference isn't astronomical to where you want it. So if you're like, all right, it's going to cost X amount of dollars to to put front suspension and back and forelink it and all this stuff and build a new floor and all this stuff to get it to lay frame. Then it's going to cost a little bit more or however much to put it on the body. Most people are going to skip right over that because they already want it body dropped. So if they're out there and you have both your trucks parked next to each other and someone has cash in hand to buy, they're going to buy Joey's. That's 99.5% of the time. 2 reasons. There's still more room in his back seat than yours, and his is body dropped.
Now you're getting into now you're nitpicking. Now you're nitpicking. But I was talking about this versus that kind of thing.
No, I know. I just remember the time I jumped in your back seat. Like I remember I opened, because I've ridden in the back seat of Joey's 4Runner around Summer Madness and stuff, cruising around
100 times.
And I remember I opened the back of your 4Runner door to jump in, and you go, there's not a lot of room. And I'm like, why? And I jumped in. I was like, oh, I can't fit in this thing.
Yeah, it's not. It's a little tight back there. It's a little tight back there.
But well, that's another story for another day.
Another story for another day. But no. I totally get what you're saying there. But so my retort to that is, and it goes right back to the time thing. So and I'm only talking from my personal experience. So taking my truck to go get it done, I just wanted it bagged. I wasn't interested in getting it body dropped because, yes, it's the same. I mean, the same front suspension, it's the same rear suspension, but having to and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but having to order the frame rails and then putting it on a jig and building the frame and getting it to where it can go back onto the body was exponentially longer than what I did. Because what I did was just replacing the front suspension, replacing the rear suspension using the stock frame, and then putting it back under the truck. Now, the person who built it might be listening and say well, no, it's much different, which it might be because I'm not a fabricator. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is my truck did get done faster, in my opinion, than it would have got done being body dropped. So that
I think in your situation, 100% you're right. And it's different in everyone's thing. But if we're talking about cost wise, you pull your truck up, you pull Joey's truck up. They're both the same truck, but one of them is body dropped, one of them is not. And you want to talk about cost factor. I mean, to throw a number at it, I would say $25,000. You know what I mean? Is the number for either truck, and maybe someone will be Joey. Maybe you put $25,000 on both trucks, and then someone's gonna wheel and deal more with you versus with Joey. So they're gonna be well, this truck has more, and he wants 25. Your truck has a little less, so I'll give you 22. You know what I mean? So maybe they might be worth the same in the grand scheme of things, but the negotiation factor is in your truck.
Yeah, that's true. And kind of a side note too, I remember almost exactly a year ago, we were sitting at the Awakening up in Oregon, and someone asked me just randomly on Instagram, they're like, what would you sell your truck for? I forget what they said. They're like, oh, I'm looking for a truck like yours. What would you sell yours for? I said, well, it's not for sale, but you know what? If I wouldn't let it go for any less than 30. And I just threw that out there just as a total okay, but now here we are. That's not too freaking far off. So it's crazy. And crazy in the last year how much things can change. Because I told you about that conversation and we all had a good laugh. But here we are.
Well, here's the thing too. I think your truck was even worth more than that back when we had that conversation. But in the last probably few months, me and you have had these conversations about the prices of trucks. And I'll tell you something, and you're just like, Jesus, that's so much money. But I think there was a gap between when you were wheeling and dealing your mini trucks, and then you got your 4Runner, and then now, right? There was a gap where you weren't in the market for anything. Yeah, you weren't in the market for anything. So the market changed with you not even paying attention to it.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's same with me. I wasn't in the market for anything. So now I'm just comparing 10 years ago prices to now prices, where it actually has crept up, if people are paying attention. So that's why Dave, someone who's been buying and selling trucks,
he's way more keen
this entire time. I'm like, oh my God, that's a lot of money. He goes, oh, it's worth it. And then he breaks it down to me and he talks about how much time it's going to take to do paint and body, do suspension, do this, or do interior, the amount of money you're going to spend on interior alone. it's a lot of money, because interior, it's the same way. It's like, it's still a lot of money no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a C10 or a 57 Chevy or a 64 Impala or a 95 Toyota pickup.
Mm-hmm. It's the same amount of work to put the interior in a hot rod and put it in a mini truck. It's the exact same amount of work.
Yeah, the shop isn't going to look at it and go, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to charge you less because it's only this." Yeah. It's a mini truck, and they're like, we should be grateful for that as mini truckers.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That the prices are now. Yeah, it sucks sometimes that you can't find deals on stuff anymore, but it's like.
I think then that's a really great point. I think that's for the betterment of the entire scene, because like it allows us to mature and grow. And I always I go back to shops and how important shops are, not only to build these things, but I've said this many times before, is the economy of all this thing going on. Because without the shops building the trucks that get sold, or even the people building them at their house, even the people building trucks to eventually sell them to build something else, keeps this whole thing going. And while that and it ripples out to even to what we do, because if people are out there building trucks to sell to other people, to build more trucks, to go to shows that show promoters put on, who have us come to the shows and film, and then vendors come to the show to set up booths. I mean, it all ties together, and it's hard for, you have some people out there who are like, people should be building their own trucks, and people who buy trucks are so and so whatever. Like you can't say that, because it's this economy.
It is, and people that build stuff in the garage, we talked about it before. It's fine, because a lot of people just enjoy it, and they're completely knowledgeable. They just do it, and it's like they enjoy that process of building the truck. And they're knowledgeable in it, and they do it on the weekends, and they do it with their buddies, or they that's what they do as their like
hobby, or I mean, it's all a hobby for us.
That's how they wind down from work, is they go in the garage and they work on their truck. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome, because in that aspect, you and I always bring it back. Always goes back to money, because doesn't everything really go back to money? Like, you should feel confident buying something. Like if you're you go to a Tacoma and you're like, oh, it's so much money, and you're like, why is it so much money? Well, know that in your head, it's not going to go down in value. It's only going to go up. Mm-hmm. So the confidence is there when you're buying these things that you are now. It's almost an investment.
Yeah.
So you have to financially be smart about it. Like you can go and buy. So Tacomas were made from 95.5 to 2004. The 2001 to 2004s seem to be more desirable, because they all have the same motor. They all have essentially the same exact truck, but they have different front ends. Mm-hmm. And stuff like that. And I think in the interior is upgraded too in those. But you can save money and buy a 97 or a 96 and just change the front end. Right. So you can definitely, if you're out there and you're kind of like, that's so expensive for this 2003, well, go look for a 96.
Yeah.
And
there's definitely still ways to get out there and find deals and make stuff happen, within your capability and within your budget and stuff like that, Mm-hmm. So still on this bit about like the built not bought, buying trucks, finished. So we're kind of like, leaning towards the fact that, buying finished trucks is a viable thing, because you're getting something. So far we've said that you're saving time, Mm-hmm. We still really didn't get into like exactly if you're going to save money or not buying a finished truck, because that's debatable. Mm-hmm. Because, is the product worth the same after it's done, or if it's not. But also the next thing to discuss is having something built and buying something finished is the work, the unknown work. So, but if you were to buy a truck that you knew was built like Bio or Fat Fabs, like, you're getting a quality truck. But what about the many, many, many other trucks out there that look finished, that are finished, but are questionably done? So like that's that weird space you're in, you know?
Yeah, and the price is going to reflect that, because they're going to get beat down on their price. So if you see something that's way less money, you're like, man, that seems like a really good deal. I wonder why it's a really good deal. Mm-hmm. And then you get there, it's like you get there and look at it and you're just like, oh, now I know why, because everyone that's looked at this vehicle for sale knows that they're going to have to maybe replace a motor, maybe redo the front suspension.
Or the back, yeah.
You know, yeah, because like Tacomas, again, the front suspension on Tacomas, if you don't do them right, they're going to break.
Yeah.
And so if you go walk up to a Tacoma and you see that they're using cups like a S10 to back the front, I would stay away from that. Mm-hmm. Unless the price was reflective of the money I'm going to have to put in to redo that.
Right. Yeah, yeah, and that adds again to the deciding what these trucks are worth. You know.
Yeah, and you decide what it's worth to you, because it could be in the moment where you're like, well, this Tacoma, I know how to do suspension, but I don't know how to do paint. So this truck's already painted, but the suspension I can redo.
Uh-huh.
Or if you know how to do paint and not suspension like Dave, he looks at a truck and goes, the body's straight on this. I could scuff this truck up and paint it for super cheap.
And the suspension's already done.
And the suspension's done, but yeah, exactly. So the suspension is fine. And so that makes sense for him. So it all, but if you don't know anything, if you don't know how to tinker with suspension, if you don't know how to do paint and body, you have to think about, like, those are going to be very expensive things depending on what you want this truck to look like.
Right. And then, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then that's up to the person to look at it and go, okay, so if I bought this truck and possibly the front end needs to be redone and it still needs to be painted and it needs interior, so then why don't you start with the stock truck? Like, that's another issue that comes up.
It is. And that's why but essentially that's the values of the stock trucks go up, because there's not very many of them left in good condition. Like, for example, my 97 Tacoma, when I have a garbage can in my garage full of random interior parts, but when I get that truck back, I have actually been looking at buying almost like a full truck just to get interior out of it.
Okay.
You know, like if I find a truck that's like, usually the interior is not in great shape, but if I found a truck that the interior was like all there, and it was like, say, $2,000 because the motor was blown or that was in a wreck, I would buy that truck just for the interior. Because if I'm trying to hunt down interior, the time it's going to take me and the money it's going to take me to find all that, it doesn't make sense, because I could have it right then and there.
Right. You know, that brings up an interesting point, and this is kind of like going off on a different tangent, but I think it's for for your truck specifically, I think it might be worth bringing up. Have you ever heard of the my father's axe paradox, or the ship paradox? No. You never heard of that? So the paradox goes, let's like the ship paradox. Actually, let's use the my father's axe paradox. So your dad gives you an axe that was a family heirloom, but it's kind of beat up. So you decide that, like, oh, the handle's kind of beat up, so I'm going to change the handle, and you put a new handle on it. And then you go along, and then the blade is kind of falling apart. You know, the blade is kind of falling apart, so I think I'm going to change the blade. And then you change the blade. Well, is that still your father's axe, or is that a different axe? And I say that for your truck because you got a new cab for it, right?
I do have a new cab, but we haven't decided what we're going to use it. But let's say, yes, we're going to use the new cab.
So at what point was it your old Tacoma to where now it's just a different Tacoma?
Yeah, exactly. I've thought of that too, especially with a lot of the older trucks that I've seen. I mean, Premier Street Rods there in Lake Havasu, they make GM approved cabs.
Oh, that one was at our show.
Yeah. So you can buy, say you go buy an old GM truck and you're like, oh, this cab is completely gone. I'm going to buy this new cab and set it on this frame. Well, the frame, say you buy a GSI frame. So now you have a GSI frame, a new cab, a new bed sides. You didn't put the same, like, what part of that truck is the truck that you bought?
Right.
Especially if it's a sentimental thing.
That's why I use that paradox, my father's axe thing.
Yeah. That is pretty funny. I think of the old rat rods too, where they just use the cowl just to get the VIN, just to register it.
And that's been a thing since forever. They've always been making Repop parts, and now that's becoming more and more like a thing, because I mean we both follow Cali Boy Trader, and I'm sure a lot of the people who are watching do too. And every day I tune in and I'm looking at all these rides, and I'm just blown away by, like, you know, like you're saying, sometimes it's just the tub of a 64 convertible, the convertible part.
Yeah.
And and then they have like a 62 Impala rag, literally half gone, and they're like, okay, this is 10 grand.
I know, and I don't know if it's maybe just above mine or our pay grade, because when you get to these certain vehicles, certain things matter that are original, even though the rest isn't, or something. You know what I mean? Like, oh, is that an original 2-wheel drive versus 4-wheel drive, or is that original this or that? You know, even though like you said, just the tub makes it more valuable because it's the original tub, even though everything's been replaced around it.
My theory is, this is my theory. My theory is as we get farther along and these cars become less and less attainable, like I think about the tens of thousands of 64 Impalas that have been rebuilt. So they were very plentiful back. I hate using this from back of the day, but let's just say back in the day, they were very plentiful. And people were taking those and they were restoring them. Well, now you have this whole, like, what's the right way to put it? You have all of these cars that have been restored. Well, they're not going to get, like, unrestored, so you're not going to find ones that are not restored. So I'm wondering if that's why these things that are so dilapidated are worth something, because they're not built cars already.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. Because since it was so long ago, so you say a 64 Impala, and then it was, it ran its course, the motor blew, it whatever happened to it, and then someone got it in the 70s, and then restored it in the 70s or the 80s. That's a completely different restoration than now. As far as quality. So you see these cars that have been restored in the 80s that are now being restored or re-updated.
And that was the next thing that I was going to say. So, like, where I think we're going to get to a point, even with mini trucks and stuff like that, like, we're going to get to a point where you're not going to go find a car that's not restored and then restore it. What you're going to do is you're going to go find a car that has been restored, and then you're going to re-restore it. And I think that's going to be, like, the next thing. So, like, you're not going to find, Cali Boy on the Cali Boy Trader, or I'm probably saying that wrong. Anyway, you're not going to find, like a 64, we 64 Impala, I guess, a lot for an example. You're not going to find an unrestored 64 Impala. What it's going to be advertised is, like you said, 80s restoration, ready to go to be re-restored.
Yeah, and that's I remember when I worked at this shop, like a body shop, long time ago, and it was all hot rods and stuff, and a lot of the stuff that was built in the late 70s and early 80s used like Volvo suspension or Mustang 2, because Mustang 2 suspension came on Pinot, so it was super easy to get, and it usually bolted right in and did its thing. But that stuff today is not up to par, so you have to change it out with all the good stuff they make now. And I think you're exactly right with the mini trucks. Is eventually the only thing left will be modified ones
that need to be remodified. And then, so say if you bought a Mazda and it had shaved taillights, and you're like, I don't want shaved taillights. What are you gonna do? You can't find a bed. It's gonna be hard to find a stock bed. You're gonna have to buy another truck just for the bed. Or something like that. So, and that's like the situation you're in with your Tacoma, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of my Tacoma.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it soon, I think.
Yeah? And bring it back?
Yeah. Yep. I got to talk to Sean where it's at and to have him get it into a roller, because there's a lot of changes that are happening on this side of the spectrum, which I will go over in a separate vlog video soon.
Nice. Well, you brought up, if this episode comes out after the Jaime episode, you brought up in Jaime's episode that the wheels you picked up.
Yep, got the wheels for it. So that Mazda that Dave bought. Well, so Baco Dave had the Tacoma that we talked about earlier, sold it to Cheesy, and then Dave went and looked at the Mitsu in Texas, didn't buy it. On the way home, stopped here in Arizona, and bought a Mazda from Tom Jenkins, the guy that has Far From Losing now. And took that back to Bakersfield, and it was basically a frame off. He had to take everything off and redo this. But the wheels on it were Anki LM1s,
which are like, but my favorite wheels of all time are the Alba Banks, and those are my second favorite wheels of all time.
Yeah,
they're just such a good looking wheel.
Yeah, so and I think they look on 90s and 2000 early 2000s chrome wheels are weird because they do I think they look good on certain things but not everything. So I think the LM1s look the best on Tacomas.
Yeah.
So I had a brand new set of 18s when I built my Tacoma a long time ago. Sold them, always regretted it, wanted them back, and now I got 20s. So
that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm stoked about it. But I just thought about that. I wonder if this episode's going to come out before Jaime's because we talked about that on there too.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anywho. But so the one thing, so again, to go off on another thing to talk about, because, we were talking earlier about how sometimes people get very nerded out on specific trims, whether it be Civics or anything like that. Because I do that with Mazdas, actually. I'm actually a Mazda nerd, and I've said this before. I've had this interesting relationships with Mazdas over the years, and it got to the point where I had a bunch of them. I had 4 or 5 of them at one time, and that's what I would nerd out on, little things. My favorite thing to do is go to the junkyard and look for parts, but then also look at sometimes there would be a standard cab 2200, but it'd have a 26i cluster in it for some reason, or the 26. Or are they the 26i's? Yeah, the 26i's had very specific chrome trim around the front bumper, so that was always interesting to find those on trucks that weren't 2600i's. I actually still have this. My last piece of Mazda thing that I own, and I'll hold on to it maybe until I build another Mazda or whatever, is a Indonesian valve cover. And I forget, it's so funny that I have it, but I forget the name. But in Indonesia, they call Mazda something else, as they do a lot in different countries. They go by different names. So this Mazda valve cover is an Indonesian valve cover with the Indonesian Mazda name on top of it. So, I always nerd out about that kind of stuff. And the other thing I always nerd out about, and this goes back to my car lot days, buying and selling a lot of cars, I would get super stoked finding vehicles that were built by shops back in the day. One example is my dad's all, hey, we're gonna go look at this Lincoln, and it was it was a weird one. It was a 70, an early 70s Lincoln Town car, so not a really cool car, just this random car. I'm like, okay, cool. So we go look at it, and I'm looking at it, and it's mildly custom, and it's got shaved door handles, and it's got some little touches. I'm like, this is not. So there's something up with this thing. So I start looking at it, and I open the door, and on the dash is a medallion from Barris Customs. So every car that they would build, they put these medallions on them. And I was like, no way. This is a Barris custom car. So it's always cool finding little stuff like that. There was another instance where I found a car. It was a 58 Oldsmobile. And it had some work done by, I forget the shop, but I was really stoked to find it. And then just as another little side story, one time I was in Hollywood and I was walking around at this movie premiere. And I'm there trying to see what's going on. I'm trying to get pictures of some stuff. And I take 2 steps back and bump into this person. And I'm like, oh, hey, sorry about that. I turn around and it's George Barris.
That's awesome.
Just a random. I looked at him like, oh, hey, you're George Barris. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay.
Luckily you weren't the guy that knocked him down.
What do you mean?
You said you turned around and bumped into him.
Who knocked him down? Is that what killed him?
No, I'm just saying, imagine if you knocked George Barris down. That would suck.
I thought you were saying that someone knocked him down and that's what killed him.
Oh, anyway. No. I'm saying imagine if you turned around and this dude's on the ground and then you're like, oh, my bad. And it's George Barris. Man, I knocked over George Barris.
Yeah. So that's an interesting little story that I had. But also, so back to the car thing. So when I curated the 4Runner, I made sure, because of all my past experiences like that, I made sure that when I built that I wanted someone else to have those experiences. So when it was at Sadistic Ironworks getting it done, I said, make sure you stick Sadistic wherever you want on this thing. So if you look under it, on the front suspension, on the front bag mounts, the upper bag mounts, it says Sadistic. And if you were to drop the fuel cell, and you can't even see this, if you drop the fuel cell and look at it, it says Sadistic on front of the fuel cell. And then when I took it to Alan to have it painted, I told him, I said, make sure you put AK airbrushing or something in here that someone knows that you painted this thing.
Yeah.
Because I want that for like whoever finds it in like 20 years. You know, they're looking at this Forerunner that's in someone's backyard and they're just like, oh man, this is there's something going on with this thing. And then they see like, oh no shit, it was built by a sadistic and all this other stuff. So that was just a touch on that point that we made earlier about nerding out about stuff. And, you know,
I think when it comes to trim levels, trim levels are fun to me. Not any in the mini truck world, but also in the mini truck world, but just in the car world in general. The trim levels and things like that are really fun, especially when you get into like supercars and things like that. That's what sets them apart is the trim levels, because you can order them in different ways and whatever. But the stories like you were talking about with putting sadistic on there and like someone getting that truck in a couple of years or 20 years or 30 years and then researching the history about it. I think that's insanely cool because
it's just a neat little thing.
Yeah. Like following the journey of where was this car? There's a guy on YouTube and it's Vice Grip Garage, and he goes and gets old cars that have been sitting in fields. He gets them running and his whole stick is.
He drives them like home.
And he drives them home, you know what I mean? Or whatever. But, like his whole thing is just like keeping these things, not necessarily keeping them alive, but just the stories. Because if you think like what makes me like the crazy thing to me is like the memories inside that truck, like your truck driving around Summer Madness and you and Angie having a blast and you and your friends having a blast. Like there was so much going on in that moment, you know, in that moment in time. And then, so imagine that truck sitting in a field in 30 or 40 years. And it's almost like you imagine it's like real quiet outside, and then you stick your head in the truck and you look around and you can hear like Angie yelling at you, really, really faint. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or you yelling and just like that. So there's like that weird history that I think is super cool. Like you look at an old Chevy truck sitting in a field, and you're just like, I wonder what happened in that truck. You know, all the memories inside that thing. So
yeah, no, that's really cool. That's a really cool thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So leaving those traces where people can kind of, especially now with social media, because someone gets that in 30 or 40 years, they can research sadistic, they can research,
and there's AK,
like and they can go on YouTube and they can find like, oh man, this truck was built there, or
and it kind of does. It kind of does two things too. Like that's the like, you know, the romantic part of it that I'm setting it up for the future, but also to kind of like go into this conversation that we're having that backs some stuff up. Because how many times have you looked at like something and they're like, oh, this was built by, you know, Bio, and they're like, how do I know that? You know? Yeah. So
yeah, for sure. There's definitely if you're a shop, you should be putting some sort of
like mark on there or something like that.
Yeah, like you're in the comic book stuff, and I've been in the baseball card stuff, and you get like things. What is it called when you get them
authenticated?
Authenticated. There you go. So you can get your suspension authenticated.
That'd be interesting if there was like a whole like there's just a whole like thing about authenticating trucks.
I know, but then
and builds and stuff.
Imagine the political storm behind that.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, you authenticated this from this shop. This shop sucks, and they don't do it this way. It's like, oh man.
Well, I mean that's just a thing that happens all the time anyway. I mean that could be a whole other conversation by itself.
I mean, I would like to watch it go down because I like to watch the drama happen on
everybody
media
does. Well, cool. Well, yeah, so that was interesting. Do you think we got to the bottom of anything as far as like truck values or
no
we just talked about it.
If anyone has an interior for a Tacoma, let me know. I need it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's too many variables, and it goes back again to that whole gray area about so many different reasons and things make the outcome the way it is. So if you see it, so also just if you're gonna buy a truck that's like make it make sense to you financially, I guess. You know, so sit down and really think about where your money is gonna go.
Yeah, you know, and that's to tie into another conversation that we had about like planning. When I started with the Forerunner, I knew that I wanted it to be, you know, done correctly. And the first thing I did was just start talking to people. Like the first, you know, the first person I talked to actually at the time was Jap from Freaks of Nature, because at the time, you know, he was having a lot of stuff built, and you know, it's like, what advice can you give me when I approach a shop on what to do, you know? And he gave me some advice, and you know, I think I'd talk to you probably, and you know, that's it. Just start talking to people. Put together a plan and how you're going to approach this, you know, rather than, I think what happens to a lot of people is they go like just to the shop and they go, okay, here you go, you know, here's my deposit, let me know what happens. You know, without asking any questions or.
That's a whole nother story, man.
That's a whole nother story.
If you go and you do your due diligence on everything, including shops, you know, if something seems too cheap or whatever, you know, maybe find out why it's so cheap, because your money is worth a lot to you and your time is worth more to you. So it makes sure it's going to where the vehicle's going to be. Yeah,
because everybody works super hard for their money, and they don't want to, and they want a return on it, and they want it to be done correctly. So just take the time, ask a few questions, put some thought into it. That happens to me a lot. Like as much as I like went into that with a plan, a lot of the time in my life I don't. I just go do something. So I even have to tell myself sometimes, like, hold on, stop, take a minute, let's think about it, let's talk it through.
Yeah, let's talk it through.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now. I wonder if I wonder if our listeners ever get frustrated with us. We're like at the beginning of the episode, we're like, we're going to talk about truck values. Like we're somehow going to get to the bottom of this, right? And then we get to the other end and we're just like, I don't know. Sorry, guys.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think I know that I've gotten a couple of messages. And they're just like, I wanted to answer questions right then and there. Like, I wanted to reach through and be like, no, wait, what about this? And I'm just like, if there is something we're talking about and you have a point to bring up, please message
us.
Drop us a message, because there's a lot of things that we don't think about or take notes, and we're going to revisit these subjects over and over and over again, you know what I mean, in the future, or utilize them in other topics too that we can take.
I think I need to be okay with that, because like I've been like going through this list, like us talking about the built not bought thing again, or you know, I feel like we've talked about that before. We've talked about like shops and getting stuff done. But you're right. I think we just have to keep on talking about these subjects, and then maybe you and I, as the people producing this, will grow, and hopefully our audience listening to this will grow from it. You know, and then maybe we're all just kind of helping each other out.
I think that's what it is. Is just helping each other out, because I think that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah,
I'm done. I'm done.
That's a great thing. Back to the questions thing. I think another soon upcoming episode, we'll go back to answering some viewer questions. So everybody who's watching and listening, please do that. Go to our Instagram page, The Drop with Frank and Brian, the whole thing, The Drop with Frank and Brian. That's where we kind of like are you know, putting all of this together, like what's the right word, you know, collating. What's the word I'm looking for?
I said I was done. I'm done. You said this is all you.
No, I know, but I'm just trying. That's where we're the main place we're putting all this stuff. So please go to our Instagram if you got any questions, comments, concerns you want to answer. You're driving in your car right now. You're listening. You're like, oh no, this is what I think. Drop that on the Instagram.
Yeah, don't message Custom Life. Don't message Grinder TV. Message the Drop, because anything that has to do with the Drop, we want it there. And
cool. And then also, real quick, don't forget about our giveaways. Those are still going on.
We're going to be giving stuff away till the end of the year. Whenever this comes out, we don't know what it's going to be, but it'll be something.
So make sure you go to our websites and check out what we're currently giving away, because again, we don't know when this episode is going to air. So go check it out. Buy stuff off of our sites, livelifecustom.com, grinder-tv.com.
Yeah.
Buy stuff, please. Thank you. And
I have to ship stuff.
Go ahead.
It reminds me, I had an order the other day, and I keep forgetting, because it's a friend of mine, Susie, ordered some shirts, and I'm sorry, Susie, I'll get them to you. You probably have them by now.
Yeah, there you go. Enjoy the shirts that Brian just sent to you.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Later.
Peace.